Hello, my name is Eduardo. This is my partner Wilbur, and welcome to something we are calling Wine Commanders, a slapdash, poorly conceived version of that show that aired on the BBC Two in the early 2000s called Time Commanders, that basically revolved around a group of average Joes, people that knew little about video games or antiquity, and they kind of assembled them into groups, plop them down into weird war room bunker like space, and then basically had these teams negotiate their way through an ancient battlefield. And then you also had usually two professors up in the wings providing kind of color commentary and just generally casting castigations onto the poor contestants, very frequently deserving castigation to some of their choices on the battlefield. So this is basically that, but we've decided to mix up the bellicose with the Bacchic. So I will be providing the commentary. I am a PhD candidate in classics. My partner is a well-adjusted person, so he's not in academia, and he will be playing the role of a commander. He knows general knowledge about antiquity, but nothing that can give him kind of a cutting edge on the battlefield. He's also not familiar with strategy games whatsoever. So I basically told him about left click and right click, but that's pretty much it. So we're going to see how he does on the battlefield, and we're going to cut to gameplay now. All right. So for tonight, we're going to be doing the Battle of Asculum. This battle occurred in 279 BC, and it is the second major engagement of the Pyrrhic War, the war wherein Pyrrhus of Epirus, this kingdom that existed in what is now parts of northern Greece and Albania, he, at the request of several polities in southern Italy, but especially the city of Tarentum, he came over along with some forces, both his own and also some mercenary forces, and then he mixed up with some local forces in the area, and he sought to curb the encroaching power of Rome in southern Italy, which at this point was not only inhabited by native Italians, but also by several Greeks that came over roughly, again, it's a long span of time, but let's say roughly 350 years prior into the area. And the Tarentines were part of this kind of Greek inhabitants in this region. There's a lot of things that led up to this war, some minor quibbles here and there, some diplomatic mishaps, including maybe the violation of a naval treaty by the Romans, possibly. But what certainly did not help was that two Roman diplomats came to Tarentum. Apparently they spoke Greek badly, which is possibly the worst thing that you could do to an ancient Greek. They were laughed out of the city, and in the process, apparently, as some stories tell us, that the town drunk apparently went up to one of the Romans and defecated on his toga. This Roman gentleman then brought the stained toga to the next Senate meeting, what I imagine was a very riveting morning. And then eventually it just snowballed into this engagement now. So Wilbur is playing the Roman forces under the leadership of Publius Decius Mus. The other consul was also present, but the game only renders one of the Roman consuls present on the battlefield for today. Note, as I put on my glasses so that I can actually see, but I'm blinded by the actual uniform purple clothing of the soldiers, of course, they would not actually be wearing purple on the battlefield. It'd be a mixture of things because, of course, Roman standardization and uniformity in the army was not at this point a thing. It would later on happen in the late Republic and the early Empire, but at this point it was pretty much BYE, bring your own equipment, and this is why we're going to go through the soldiers and where you're going to see changes in the armor as we go along. But Wilbur has highlighted the first rank. The first rank are called the Velites. These are your skirmishers. You have 3 of them. They're relatively short-range javelin throwers, very lightly armed. I mean, they have a very small shield that can maybe block some projectiles aimed at them, but they're horrible in close combat. You do not want to mix them up in that. And note also that they're wearing some really nice headgear. They're supposed to be wolf pelts, although the rendering on that is kind of sketchy. Yeah. Well, not far off. And then after them, you have the Hastati. These are your front rank troops. They're more heavily armed than your Welites. These serve for close combat. They have their trusty gladius. They have their shield with a very prominent boss that they can knock people on the head with. And they also carry some pila, the singular being pilum. These are javelins that they would throw before they were charged by the enemy, and this would kind of help soften the ranks before they met. And I forget how many they actually carry in Rome, but in reality they would have two, one that's heavier and one that's lighter. And then after your Hastati, you have your Principes, basically upgraded Hastati. They have slightly better armor, and they have better veterancy, so they're a little bit more seasoned. The game actually depicts this not only in the stats, but they also give you a little more chevrons there, if you can see in the bottom. And then you have your most seasoned, most experienced, your crack troops. It is the Triarii. These are more heavily armed. You can actually see that represented in the in-game model. And unlike the other two ranks in front of them, they actually carry spears, which might be useful against the dreaded elephants that you will encounter. And we'll see that once we get to Pyrrhus' forces. The Romans actually had an expression, res venet atriarios. It came down to the Triarii, which basically means like, how was that expression? It came down to the wire. Yeah, exactly. Things went really bad if it came down to the Triarii. You're at your final rank. Things really came down to the wire. So you don't want that to happen. So that's an expression that the Romans had for when, things are bad. And note that you have just one singular regiment of equites. These are your cavalry. The Romans are more famed for their heavy infantry. Typically, they would have allies supplement their cavalry forces. For example, Caesar in Gaul used a fair number of Gallic allies that supplied cavalry for him. And then you have a little regiment there of your general's cavalry with Publius Decius Mus rendered there. Now, let's, for a moment before we start the battle, look on over to Pyrrhus' side, just so we can get a feel for what he's bringing to the table. As I drink some more of this wine from Nemea, actually, so from the Peloponnese, relatively wonderful coincidence there. So let's start on the left there with what I know everybody is probably waiting for. It's the elephants. These are the staple of several Hellenistic armies. Pyrrhus maybe got these elephants through his connections with either Ptolemy Keraunos, who was the older brother of Ptolemy II of Ptolemaic Egypt. Ptolemy Keraunos kind of went around in the Mediterranean. He's a bit of a rogue. He actually killed Seleucus, so we don't like him. Maybe he had an alliance with him or Ptolemy II in Egypt, and they might have supplied him with elephants here. Very dangerous. They're very often kind of sketchily called the tanks of the battlefield. It's not a really one-to-one thing. I don't like calling them. I don't think anybody calls them that anymore, aside from some sensationalist accounts, really, because that kind of messes around with what tanks do versus what elephants do. They're namely one of their greatest benefits is actually anti-cavalry, but you don't have that many cavalry, so Pyrrhus is probably going to use them to just steamroll your infantry. And then let's see what else he has. He has some ranged troops in the back. Note he has in the front ranks these green, because in Rome Total War all mercenaries are green. I don't know, color of money or something. But these kind of are meant to represent the forces that came along with Pyrrhus, either as mercenaries with him or as allies once he touched ground in Italy and he got some help from the locals there that sought his aid. And then you have right next to them, it's the dreaded Macedonian phalanx, just the wall of pointy things aimed at you, slowly moving towards you, incredibly threatening. The anchor the anvil of any good Hellenistic force, and then you'll have the cavalry really serve as the hammer. Incredibly threatening, just a wall of spikes. How do you think you're going to deal with that?
Javelins.
Javelins are possibly a good alternative. If you can maybe even get him around the flank and kind of throw the missiles at an area that's not facing, the spikes or the spears, because one of the things that people always talk about is that you don't only have the front rank that you have to deal with, but also the back rank, because they have lifted their spears up. It's said that that might possibly help in deflecting missiles. They also have shields that are shoulder slung. So maybe not missiles from the front, but maybe if you can get your lightly armed and faster skirmisher troops along the flanks, if you can somehow deal with the elephants and the cavalry, maybe they can kind of help chip away at the phalanx there. Note in the back also you have Pyrrhus himself and his general's cavalry, but you also have, that's Pyrrhus right there. Note that these are the colors of the Seleucids because Rome doesn't have a Kingdom of Epirus faction, so they just give them the Seleucids. Maybe one of the reasons that I subconsciously wanted to play this battle or watch you play it. So you have him and his cavalry, and then you have the dreaded companion cavalry, the heavy cavalry, really brought to perfection under Philip and Alexander. That really that's when the companion cavalry reached their apex. Not to say that Hellenistic forces afterwards did not employ them, but you don't see as many vignettes that feature companion cavalry as you do in battles that feature Philip and Alexander. And I think that's everything. I know they have some native Italian forces on the other side also. Yeah, those green guys over there, Rhodian slingers in the back. Even in antiquity, they were a famed regiment. They could just lob some stones at you. And yeah, some citizen hoplites meant to kind of represent, some militia phalanx meant to represent kind of just the more basic troops there. So, what do you think is going to be the plan coming in?
Attack them from the back.
Attack them from the back? That's a relatively good strategy. The problem is getting to the back. Pero, now Wilbur is going to don his headset. I will drink more wine as he does so. Wonderful Nemeum. Site of not only a very ferocious lion that Heracles killed, but also one of the sites for the Pan-Hellenic Games. Coño, that's some good wine. Alright, so he is getting back in the swing of things for the controls, but he wants his Triarii to deploy to the flanks. This is good. Likely he's trying to match the companion cavalry that are on his right flank that are going to be advancing towards him. This is on hard difficulty. I think we might have seen that in the menu, but just in case. So Pyrrhus is advancing now. Pyrrhus, unfortunately, gets a bad rap because he's mostly remembered for the term Pyrrhic victory, which actually originated after this battle. Spoiler alert, he won this battle in actuality, but a Pyrrhic victory is a very costly victory. It's a defeat in all but name, really. It's a victory that really stings afterwards. You're going to feel it the next morning. Pyrrhus lost a lot of troops during this battle. He actually is purported to have said, if I have one more engagement with the Romans, I am ruined. So yeah, but he's an amazing general. He really kicked the kingdom of Epirus into high gear. Even in antiquity, people recognize his generalship. Antigonus Monophthalmos, one of the successors, is said to say that Philip was the closest in emulation to Alexander. Plutarch, in his account of Hannibal, has Hannibal say that Pyrrhus is the best general, Scipio is the second, and Hannibal was the third. The historicity of this account is, of course, likely a fabrication by Plutarch, but it's still interesting to think about Pyrrhus being held in such high regard, especially when his name is so associated with that. Now, we see that Wilbur has sent two Triarii on his left to kind of match the elephants. They are advancing right now. They're not bracing for the charge, which might not help them out, especially since Pyrrhus seems to have sent his companion cavalry swinging to help his elephants out. So actually, those 2 regiments of Triarii are in a little bit of danger. As of course the anvil that is the Hellenistic phalanx advances towards Wilbur's front line. He is attempting to send his Triarii, although he seems to be keeping them in reserve now. Pyrrhus seems to... Rome Total War AI Pyrrhus might not be... Oy, carajo. Okay, well, you killed Pyrrhus. Yeah, that wonderful Rome Total War AI really flexing its strategic brain here. Thank God we put it on hard, at least. So Pyrrhus, unfortunately, did a frontal assault. Sorry, I breathed into the mic there. Pyrrhus, oddly enough... Actually, let's stick to the battle, because right now things are heating up. The front rank of Hastati has met the phalanx. Wait, no, he doesn't have his Hastati in front rank. He has his Principes in the front rank, yes. His Hastati are in the back, so he kind of reversed the order there. The Triarii just beat the heck out of the elephants, it seems. I don't know where they've gone to. But it seems that the phalanx is now... This is one of the main problems with the phalanx, right? Is that the Romans have more mobility. You saw them start with a checkerboard pattern, and this formation kind of lets them rearrange themselves quickly. It allows for more fluidity, whereas the Hellenistic phalanx is kind of stuck in its form, and that's one of the main weaknesses, is that it kind of trudges along. It does present a very threatening wall, but if you can get around it, if you can circumnavigate it, or if it encounters some rough terrain, it's liable to be incredibly vulnerable to things. And this is apparently what has happened, because AI Pyrrhus has not timed his kind of coordination between his infantry and his cavalry well. Well, he's dead, yeah. Pero I guess his generalship is sorely lacking, and the phalanx was unsupported by the cavalry, which allowed Wilbur to deploy his infantry and kind of just swarm, really, the phalanx. Publius Decimus didn't even have to commit to battle, and this is funny because in the actual Battle of Asculum, it was said that Mus was about to perform a devotio, because the battle was going so badly. A devotio is this kind of quasi-legendary practice that Roman generals were purported to have done in some major battles, where they basically sacrificed themselves and they plunged headfirst into enemy lines, sacrificed themselves to the chthonic gods in order to attempt to turn the tide of battle. But Mus did not have to do that. Pyrrhus apparently performed a devotio. It did not help his army at all. Which is a shame also, because Pyrrhus not only was an actually incredible general. I've been drinking one in memory of Pyrrhus. He was also said to have, instead of teeth, Plutarch tells us that he only had one huge tooth that had divots, so it made it look like he had teeth, but it was actually just one huge tooth. Again, the veracity of these things. And he was also said to have a magical big toe that could heal you if he touched you with it. That toe did not help in this situation. Pero, c'est la vie. Now Wilbur's princely purple forces are basically mopping up. I believe the AI is just flat out retreating from the battlefield at this point. They're not even trying. The Samnites are going back to the hills of central Italy where they belong. Oh, they're running out, and Wilbur's forces have just surprisingly won. So this turned into a relatively solid Roman victory, even on hard difficulty. We played this on easy just for me to show Wilbur the mechanics of the game, and he lost that one. Pero for some reason, wow. Clear victory.
300 men.
You seem surprised by that result. Coño. Pero that's it. You won against the elephants. You didn't even have to. The Romans in the battle actually used because again, this was their second time encountering elephants. The first time they encountered it, as the story goes, is they encountered at the Battle of Heraclea in 280. They didn't actually know what to call an elephant, so they called it a Luca Boss, which is a Lucanian cow, Lucania being a region in southern Italy. And in this battle, they purportedly used these wagons that had like huge hooks on them and pointy things, and also grapnel and fire that they could hurl at the elephants. It seemed to go relatively well, but they went unsupported by the infantry, so kind of Pyrrhus's infantry swept them up. But you can see some examples still in like wargaming miniatures and stuff. They actually depict them, and it's super cool. Pero, that's it. That was astonishingly quick battle there. That was the first and very likely last, because I think 3 people are going to see this. But we had fun on a Friday night. You won. I had an excuse to drink, which is always good. And we got to play some Rome Total War. So thank you all, and bye.